Look, the Eagles are slumping and traveling to Minnesota, and things feel weird, but there is one matchup that will always scare me. Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day every single day. I appreciate my hashtag everydayers so very much. You'll make the world go round. Today on the show, we have quite a lot to get through. First, I would like to discuss one of the most important players on the Eagles defense. He is returning to the lineup this week per himself. It's Jalen Carter, and how he matches up with who plays at center. And by the way, who plays at center? And by the way, who's playing at quarterback? We've got quite a bit to go over, not to mention whatever we can do of the Zoever under. We are a little early in the week to have all of the lines that we want necessarily to do that, but we'll do our best, and we, of course, have our bold predictions. But let's start with the Jalen Carter thing. What does Jalen Carter offer to the Philadelphia Eagles? And what is missing when he is out? Because he's been out. The answer lies in run defense. So just statistically, thank you to True Media for this stuff. Jalen Carter on the field and Jalen Carter off the field, in terms of pressure generated by the Eagles as a team, doesn't change that much. That doesn't mean Jalen Carter doesn't matter. According to PFF, he's good for 3 or 4 pressures a game. That does make a difference. That does matter. But rather, whatever their plan is without him, they did a good job of kind of making up for it, finding the pressure elsewhere. And in terms of like pressure leaders on the Philadelphia Eagles, they've gotten enough production out of Joshua Uche, Moro Ojomo, Jalix Hunt, that they've been able to sort of paper over the absence of Jalen Carter. But despite playing in 2 fewer games, he still has 9 total pressures, at least according to PFF's numbers, and that's ranks 4th on the team. So there's still very much generation there. It's just that without him, they found a way to get pressure anyways. Good for them. Doesn't sound like that's going to be much of an important point because he's going to be in the lineup. And the real difference is in run defense. The run defense changes a lot by a full, 1/5 of an EPA per play, which doesn't sound like a lot, but I promise you that's a huge number. 0.2 EPA per play in an on-off split is gargantuan, especially against the run, and the run game has much smaller margins and much smaller ranges. That is a huge difference. Jalen Carter matters to stopping the run. So that brings me to the matchup here, which is against the center. As a pass protection unit, I'm sure Jalen Carter will get his wins, but it'll be a little bit more normal. This will be, you will expect anybody to win a couple of reps, especially against a backup center, and Jalen Carter will not be an exception to that. It's about the run. And in the way the Vikings run the ball, a lot of zone, a lot of duo, a lot of double teams on Jalen Carter, will that work? And that's the thing, is it very often does. He can split a double team, get into the backfield, make penetration, and get a TFL. He's really good at that. So how do you kind of paper over your center, and who is going to be the center? We discussed it on the Vikings squad show, discussed it a little bit on the crossover with Louis DiBiase yesterday. I definitely see the merit to playing Blake Brandel, sticking with Blake Brandel after he had a decent game in Cleveland. And Wes Phillips even said, hey, maybe this guy found his position. Maybe you found something and you just roll with it. Is it really that good? If they do roll with it, I'll probably do a look at it on Patreon. But for whatever it's worth, against Cleveland, I thought he did really well as well. It wasn't perfect. I think that there were blemishes that aren't necessarily visibly the center screwing up, but have to do with the fact that you have a guy playing center for the first time. Communication stuff, snap count stuff, miss IDs, definitely really difficult with stunts. Will Fries practiced next to Michael Juergens a lot in camp. And so the way that they pick up stunts, they have done some work on. We've done no work on this with Blake Brandel. That matters, especially for a team like the Eagles that love to run a 4-man game, that love to do a 7-man zone split field coverage and a 4-man pressure, maybe with a little twist in there. That stuff on the inside is going to happen. And that's not to say Michael Juergens was perfect when he was in either. It's just that there's a little bit more, I would expect a little bit better communication with Juergens than with Brandel, because Brandel's in just such a foreign place. But I think the idea of Brandel as a backup center or as a kind of all 5 positions backup is super, super fun and enticing. But I think for this game, it makes a little more sense to stick with your plan. You do a lot of work in the summer, and every time you go with the hot hand or whatever, this absolutely plays in quarterback too, by the way. Every time you go with the hot hand, you render a whole bunch of those reps moot. So all of those learning experiences that you got with, hey, that so-and-so got through on this stunt in this practice rep. When we did joint practices with the Patriots, let's talk about what we should have done, and we'll try. And that work is out the window now. You may as well have missed camp practices, right? Now you're putting yourself in a disadvantage. And I guess that kind of brings me to the quarterback thing. But before I move on from it, I do want to say, while I think it's the better idea to do Juergens, I'm not super sure. And if it did end up being Brandel, I'm not going to show any surprise about that. I think that would be perfectly logical to say, yeah, we know it's a little bit on the fly, but it worked really well. We're going to stick with it. I would totally get it. It's not the decision I would make, but I would absolutely get it. At quarterback, I've been super vocal about how I really don't think that, sticking with Carson Wentz throughout for the foreseeable future is a smart idea, but the decision is made for you if the health isn't right? And so let's really quick do this, because everybody wants to know who's going to play at quarterback. If you're listening, you're an Eagles fan, hello. If you're listening to this, wondering who is going to play at quarterback, it is trending pretty hard toward Wentz. Wentz has been a full participant in practice. JJ McCarthy has been limited with a high ankle. He said it's not 100% yet. They're 5 weeks, call it 4.5 into, by the time, by game time, they will be 5 weeks into a 4 to 6 week timeline. And he was given by other doctors a 6-week timeline as well. So it feels like this would be a bit early. And if they could push him in, if they really, really, really wanted him to push it, but that's never really been their attitude. So it does feel like, for at least this one, it's going to be Carson Wentz. Then you get to the Chargers game, which is on a short week. And unless the clear date happens to land exactly in that 4 or 5 day stretch between the Eagles and Chargers games, McCarthy might miss that one too. And then you're not seeing him until November, but a lot of that is a quirk of the schedule, but you're missing 6 weeks functionally with what is normally a 6-week injury. It would be pretty normal. And I think if we did see him in this game or in the Chargers game, it would be fast. So I think it'll be Wentz. And what that means is the offense simplifies a lot. It gets back to, your universal concepts and your quicker game, and it's going to be a little boring, but you go to war with the horses you have. And then, of course, we have to deal with more Carson Wentz improv mode, which has never really been my favorite thing, but it has gotten some pretty clutch touchdowns at the end of games. And it kind of leads to what we were talking about with Louis yesterday on the crossover, as the Vikings as this slow start team that finishes strong, and the Eagles as this fast starts team that finishes really weak, and maybe a game that ends up a little closer than you think at the end. That's at least how these teams have played these games in that way. Can they buck those trends? Can the Vikings get up and start fast? Can the Eagles have a good second half and, not burn out by the middle of the third quarter? That's sort of the main question here. But a lot of it comes down to, what tools do you have to handle the threats that the other team presents? you can't really come up with a game plan until you understand those answers, and those answers aren't that easy for the Vikings. As for the Eagles, a lot of guys are getting healthy. Landon Dickerson's coming back. Quinyon Mitchell returns to practice. Jalen Carter returns to practice, says he's going to play. So the Eagles are getting a lot of their important people back, and the Vikings are getting a lot of important people back too. So how is this going to affect things? Let's look at the betting lines next on the Zoever Under. Today's show is brought to you by BetterHelp. Life can be tough on and off the field, and behind millions of mental health journeys are therapists who showed up, listened, and helped people take a step forward. BetterHelp is shining the spotlight on those connections while also making it simple for you to find support whenever you need it. Therapy moments can be life-changing, whether it's learning to better connect with your kids, healing a relationship, or finding healthy ways to manage stress. I strongly recommend therapy for anybody who's even considering a little bit. Get out there, give it a try, and if you don't like your therapist, you should try a different one because those experiences can be a lot different from therapist to therapist. Don't let one bad experience ruin the whole idea for you, and that's where BetterHelp can come in. They can help you find the right therapist, and you can switch anytime at no additional cost. This World Mental Health Day, which was October 10th, join in celebrating the therapists who have helped millions take a step forward. If you're ready to start your own journey, BetterHelp can help you find the right therapist. Our listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/lockedon. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Today's episode is also brought to you by PrizePicks. Every day you make decisions and you're smart, so they're the right one a lot. So why don't you get paid for making the right decision? That is what PrizePicks is offering you. It's a fun and simple way to add a little more excitement to football, especially to games like, Bengals Steelers Thursday night that you don't otherwise care about. You just pick more or less on player projections like Saquon Barkley rushing for a touchdown, which happens a lot, or Jalen Hurts rushing for a touchdown, or Justin Jefferson's receiving yards or receptions, or Cam Akers passing yards, because we know that that's a thing. Whatever it is, you are in the game. It's super quick. You can just log on to the app, pick 2 to 6 of your favorite players and whether they'll do better or worse than their PrizePicks projection. And there's even a new injury reboot feature. So if your player leaves early and doesn't return, it's not going to count against you. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 in lineups after your first $5 lineup. Real quick, you got to know there is a Steph Curry max discount. That means if Steph Curry scores half a point in the Golden State Warriors versus Los Angeles Lakers game on October 1st, you would win that square. If you just throw that in, you can mix basketball with football. You're going to juice things up quite a bit. You got to get involved in that. So PrizePicks, it is good to be right. Moving along with the Locked On Vikings podcast, whole bunch of great content at Patreon right now, patreon.com/LukeBraunNFL for a little preview of some tush-push stuff and some recaps of the London games, including an in-depth examination of Carson Wentz and the 2 games that we got at JJ McCarthy. We've got all of that on there, so if you're curious about it, looking for something to watch this weekend, go check it out. Let's move on to some betting lines with the Zoever Under. This week on the Zoever Under, we have a little bit less to work with just because of when I'm recording this, but we're going to do our best. We still have the passing props and the touchdown scorers, which do tell us quite a bit, but just going off of the broad strokes right now. So if you're unfamiliar, the Zoever Under is more than just a betting segment. I'm not going to give you my advice on what I think you should bet. You probably don't want that anyways, but rather I see the betting lines as a proxy for public opinion. What do people think about this game? And what people think about this game is the Eagles are favored by 2.5 points. The money has edged slightly toward the Vikings at plus 2.5 as home underdogs. But if you apply the sort of rule of thumb, 3 points for home field advantage, that basically means that the general public thinks the Eagles are about 5.5 points better than the Vikings. That's like, they think they're significantly better than the Vikings, but wouldn't win 10 out of 10 times. That the Vikings would steal a couple, and it's super possible. So that plus home field advantage leads to a 2.5 point spread with a 43.5 total that implies like a 23-20 kind of Philadelphia Eagles win. That's something like that. So, close game, not the highest scoring game, and really a lack of faith in Jalen Hurts is one of the most prevalent things here that sort of surprises me. I'll be honest, I am not the most well-versed guy in Jalen Hurts. Go listen to Louis DiBiase for that. But from my kind of from a distance, only national perspective, I always got the idea that Hurts was doing his thing, right? Louis DiBiase kept using the word limited on the crossover, which has now kind of stuck in my head that there's certain throws he's not going to make constantly. There's stuff he's not going to do that you are seeing from Jared Goff or that you are seeing from, Allen or Mahomes or Jackson or whatever. There's stuff that those guys do that Jalen Hurts is not doing. But he has his own game. And for me, this is going to be if there are any Eagles fans watching who want to know my take on Jalen Hurts, I think that there is value to being a jack of all trades but master of none. And I feel like that's how I would describe Hurts sometimes, where he can run. He's not Lamar Jackson running, but he can run. He can throw. He's not, cannon arm Josh Allen when he's throwing, but he can throw. He can get the ball out quickly, not as unbelievably crazy quick as Jared Goff or Matthew Stafford, but he can get the ball out quick, okay, when he needs to. But here's an interesting thing, and I'll throw to Tyler Forness's article. He wrote an article on Jalen Hurts and blitzes. So Hurts has been good-ish against the blitz, but if you split those blitzes between man-covered blitzes and zone-coverage blitzes, the Vikings run zone-coverage blitzes overwhelmingly. The difference is stark. Jalen Hurts, if you blitz him and play man coverage, from an EPA per play perspective, the offense slows down none. You might as well not blitz and just cover. If you zone blitz Jalen Hurts, the ADOT shrinks by half. Or the average depth of target is what that means. The offense sputters. It gets conservative. It gets way less productive, and all kinds of bad things happen. So if we're going to talk about that, that makes the Vikings a really bad matchup for Jalen Hurts. And I think that presents a challenge. Not that this means I'm predicting Jalen Hurts is going to do terrible, but it might explain why his passing total is so low. FanDuel has his passing total at 206.5. For reference, Carson Wentz's is at 231.5. That's kind of wild to me, that Jalen Hurts is not only below Wentz, a backup quarterback, but that much below Wentz. The faith is very, very low. I'm looking at, part of it is attempts, right? Passing attempts is 28.5 to Carson Wentz's 31.5. It's just a volume game. Kevin O'Connell's going to pass a lot, and Jalen Hurts is going to do a lot more running, a lot more read option, tush pushes, handing off to Saquon Barkley, all that. And I get it. That still feels like there is an expectation that Jalen Hurts is going to struggle in this game. A pretty strong one. Interception prop, if Jalen Hurts will throw an interception, is plus 125. That's a little more respectful. But, it just kind of feels like there's just not a lot of faith. And I wish I had the rushing props, but I'm doing this too early, so I can't tell you them. But if you get the chance to go look at FanDuel, go see what the rushing props mean. What did they expect from Saquon Barkley? I would expect that number is above the roof. With the Vikings run defense in the bad way that it is, and the Eagles being still a good run game, I would imagine a lot of people are going to sort of designate this as the get right game for Saquon Barkley and the Philadelphia Eagles. On the flip side, we can look at touchdown scorer props as well. I think a really misvalued one is Jalen Hurts at plus 100. Jalen Hurts scores a lot of touchdowns. I kind of feel like making him even money is a little bit, again, it feels as though the expectation is that Jalen Hurts will not produce in the way that we are used to him producing. That said, Saquon Barkley, minus 115, Jordan Mason, minus 105, Justin Jefferson, plus 135. All of those numbers are a lot closer to what we see all year long. So maybe that's the reason that the line is a little closer than it felt when you saw this game on the schedule. and you went, oh, we're coming out of the bye off this doubleheader international thing, and we got to play the defending Super Bowl champions, a lot of people are circling that thing as a loss. And when you're circling that thing as a loss, back in May when the schedule comes out, it's pretty rare that you actually get to that game and the spread is less than a field goal. And that, as home underdogs, but still, there's plenty of home underdogs that are much bigger underdogs. So there is, I think, some prevailing belief in the Minnesota Vikings in this game to at least make it closer than you expected way back in week 1 when you were looking at this one as the start of this gauntlet that the Vikings are going to have 4 games and they can't win any of them. We'll see what they can do. They're going to be at home. They're going to have they're going to have that advantage. But the other thing that we have to do here on the Zoever Under is the Rabbits pick the games. Last time we did this, of course, was for the London game, and I filmed those with different lines because I had to do it before my plane took off, or before we dropped the Rabbits off at where they were staying while we were out of town. And so we got Browns plus 4.5 instead of what the line moved to after the Dylan Gabriel news, which was 3.5. It was Browns plus 4.5, and the final score was 21-17. So Zoe won that one in a really weird way, even though if you bet that like the day before the game, you wouldn't have the Browns covered. But the Vikings covered if you bet the 3.5, but not the 4.5. So that brings Zoe to a once again astounding 4-1. For those of you who haven't been everydayers for a few years, we've been doing this for a while, and Zoe's win percentage is like above 600. It's kind of insane because these are functionally coin flips. But let's take a look at what we are working with, and I did find the Rabbits in a very comfortable position. But once I put the veg down in front of Ziti, he immediately sprung into action and took the Vikings plus 2.5. Zoe took the other side, and Ziti was not making any effort to box her out. She very much could have sniffed around and gotten to that Vikings spring mix, but nope, she went right to the Philadelphia Eagles. So once again, Zostradamus picks against the Vikings. I've got a bunch of your bold predictions coming up next here on the Locked On Vikings podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Mazda. Move and be moved. Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. All of these little details that make a game plan come together, from footwork to controlling your breathing to your technique with your hands and all that stuff matters. And a tiny little detail can be all the difference between a blowout win and a blowout loss. We've seen it happen a whole bunch, and Mazda carries that same attention to detail. They deliver confidence with every ride, with more IIHS top safety pick awards than anybody else. And you can feel that Japanese craftsmanship in every detail, from their metallic accents to available Napa leather upholstery. You can make everyday drives feel like anything but, from smooth handling to intuitive controls. Like players, we sweat every detail, because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda, move and be moved. This episode is also brought to you by Rugiet Ready. You've probably heard of Viagra or Cialis. Maybe you've even tried a pill like that. But if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rugiet Go Long. It's not just another ED pill. It's a total game changer for confidence. The effects can last up to 36 hours, so you're ready when the time is right, and you don't have to break up the whole rhythm of the night to go scurry off to the bathroom and take a pill. No, you're ready when you want to be ready, all night and even into the next day. The process is super simple. You connect with a board-certified doctor, 100% online, and if prescribed, your treatment ships discreetly right to your door. Once again, it ships discreetly right to your door, and you don't have to deal with anybody else about it. So if you're ready to level up your confidence in the bedroom, head to rugiet.com and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL for 15% off of your first order. That's rugiet.com, promo code LOCKEDONNFL. Make sure to use our code so they know we sent you. Onward with the bold predictions here on the Locked On Vikings podcast. We hit a third one this year in that Browns game. I'll go over the ones from the Browns game real quick here, but the one that hit came from Ross, who has been made whole already. We squared that away pretty quickly, but we haven't circled around to it on this show. He said that the winning margin between OSU and Minnesota would be greater than the entire total of points scored in the Cleveland-Minnesota game. This turned out to be true, 39-38. He got it by a point. So he got his Patreon. I saw he's already redeemed it, and a donation to the charity of his choice, which I forget the name of. I'm super sorry. But that has all transpired. The other ones that were submitted, somebody said 9 sacks on Dylan Gabriel, didn't get there. Somebody said a bunch of players that like matched other players matched names from Peaky Blinders. Jonathan Grenard, Isaiah McGuire, Mike Hall, Shelby Harris would all get a sack. We didn't get there. Somebody said there would be a draw. Somebody said that Wentz would not be sacked by the front seven. This turned out untrue. There was a pretty famous Malik Collins one I can remember off the dome at least. Ross actually had another one. The same guy had another one that also got close. I don't know what I would have done if you hit 2 bold predictions, but they were both really good, and I don't regret taking them both. But it was that Gabriel would be under 138 yards and that Jefferson would be over 139 yards. And both of those numbers were like not that far off. Somebody said that Wentz and Gabriel would both go over 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. Didn't get that. Somebody said Myles Garrett would have more interceptions than sacks. The number was 0 for both. Technically, one was a tackle for a gain of 1 that you probably remember that didn't go down as a sack. And somebody else said that the defenses would combine for more points than the offenses. Let's move on to the rest of the bold predictions. There's a lot of revenge game stuff going on, and including an absolutely wild one from Milograms, who submits 1 or 2 every week. So thank you so much for your participation. But we are going to save that one for last. Let's start with Connor, who says J.J. McCarthy's career high in college was 343 yards. He will eclipse this in a comeback player of the year statement win against the Eagles. 343 isn't the craziest total, but it's also probably going to be really hard for him to do this if he is not playing. I do want to say Connor... to give Connor credit, he did submit this 10 days ago. So just know I can see your timestamps. So if you are going to, for example, submit something super chest thumpy about your favorite football team, if it's not the Vikings, in the first quarter of a game that they're playing in primetime before a whole bunch of bad things happen, just know that I know you did that. Jacob Moore says the Vikings will give up 200 or more rushing yards, but less than 200 passing yards. And one of the Vikings receiving options will have more yards than the Eagles have passing yards. So you need like a Justin Jefferson 150-yard game. And then the Eagles pass for 140, but they also rush for so much that, that's what happened. That's why they don't pass at all, right? Because Saquon Barkley's gashing them. It feels like a plausible spiritual way for this to go down, but obviously those are pretty insane numbers to make the prediction sufficiently bold. Ice Cold Bud Grant, I love that so much, says, despite our opponent's nickname, Minnesota has the largest eagle population in the contiguous United States. The National Eagles Center is in Wabasha, Minnesota, the town where Grumpy Old Men and Grumpier Old Men were filmed. Every year, Wabasha hosts the Grumpy Old Men Festival at a place called Slippery's Bar and Grill. In honor of the film and bar name, the 2 grumpiest old men on the field will be involved in a turnover. Harrison Smith will cause or complete a fumble or interception in which 34-year-old tackle Lane Johnson makes a blocking error that is essential to said turnover. Absolutely love where you're headed with that. Fantastic stuff to do all that research and tie all that into a fairly simple projection that doesn't involve me tracking like 14 different things and also the temperature at 12:38 or whatever. PFF's random number generator says it's an anti-revenge game. No players playing against their former team register a sack, interception, or touchdown. That includes Isaiah Rodgers, Javon Hargrave, Marcus Epps, and Carson Wentz, among others. Sam Howell comes to mind. I feel like there's somebody else that I'm not thinking of that's also on that defense. I am going to expand this a little bit, PFF's random number generator. In addition to no sacks, interceptions, or touchdowns, I can't have no big plays. And I'm just going to leave that like a really exciting TFL that, Isaiah Rodgers gets all stoked on, a special teams play, right? If Isaiah Rodgers blocks a kick, the revenge game happened and you're not going to win here. So we'll keep it vague on purpose because I don't know all the different definitions that it could possibly be, but we will definitely stick to the spirit of it being an anti-revenge game. All of those players have total disappearing acts. Scold Outside says that because these teams are so wacky and unpredictable, we are in for a good old scorigami. Love it. Tim Peets says that in this period of uncertainty, the Vikings need a hero, some humble soul who makes that crucial play which turns around this game, nay, this season, nay, the franchise. Look where you're at. This week, when all seems lost, the hero shall arise, and his name, Jeff Okudah. This game will be referred to as the Jeff Okudah game. This would be a really hard one to define if we didn't just have the Isaiah Rodgers game. Like, if you ever say the Isaiah Rodgers game, everyone's going to know what you're talking about. So this is another one we're going to have to kind of circle back to if Jeff Okudah does have a big day and say, is this the Jeff Okudah game? I'll probably be pretty generous about this because, again, if you get these right, I'm donating to charity and giving you 3 months of my Patreon, 3 free months of Patreon and $20 to a charity of your choice. So I'm not going to be stingy, but we'll circle back to this and see if we get there in spirit. Arif Hassan, Carson Wentz enjoyer, true, says Carson Wentz will more than double Jalen Hurts' rushing yards and passing yards, and A.J. Brown will demand a trade at halftime. I won't hold you to that last part. And the last one comes from Milo Grams. This is very long, so buckle up, but I just love it. So Milo went through all of the last few games against the Eagles. He said they've had some wild games in recent memory. And they almost seem to exist in a vacuum outside of the context leading to the games otherwise. For example, the underdog has won 5 of 8 times in 5 of the last 8 matchups between the two. That includes the 2017 NFC Championship game where the Vikings were favored, but also the Tuesday night Blizzard game, the Joe Webb crazy game where the Eagles were favored by 14.5. One thing that is unique about all of those games is that they've all had a 40-yard touchdown at some point. Some have had multiple 40-plus yard touchdowns, but the unique aspect is that the team that scores the 40-plus yard touchdown has won all 8 of those games. That is such a sick find, dude. That is such a cool stat. It means nothing, but what a fun one. For example, the 40-plus yard touchdown in the 2018 matchup was Linval Joseph and the oxygen mask and that whole thing. The NFC Championship had a whole bunch of them. The ridiculous Tuesday night upset had a strip sack by Antoine Winfield. The Zach Brown game in 2019 had a whole bunch of big, giant plays and explosives. I think there were a couple of 50-yarders to Diggs. All of that is to say, Milo Grams' bold prediction is not all that bold, but it is that we will see at least 2 60-yard touchdowns in this game. This is a very bold prediction. Don't say this isn't bold. We will see 2 60-yard touchdowns in this game, one from each team, and the first team to score their 60-yard touchdown will win. So the first one to score the 60-yard touchdown will win. I'm not going to make you do 60. I'm going to change this right now so I don't forget. The pattern is 40-yard touchdowns. We can stick to 40-yard touchdowns. That there will be 2 is pretty bold, but that there will be 2 40-yard touchdowns, and whoever does it will win. The pattern here will continue, and if it's supposed to be the underdog, that favors the Minnesota Vikings. Thank you guys so much for your bold predictions, your participation. I love these so much. You've been so creative this year. I'm really impressed, genuinely blown away. Love it. We'll talk to you on Sunday after the game. We'll be live right here on the Locked On Vikings YouTube channel and Locked On Minnesota Sports with the squad show, postcast right after the game. And of course, I'll have the normal show up for you on Monday morning. We'll continue through the week from there. Short week next week, so the schedule's going to be a little compressed, but that's how things go. And we'll have time on the other end to kind of decompress and take stock of what happened over a 5-day stretch that is going to have a huge impact on the Vikings season. You're 3-2, and in 5 days you could either be 3-4, or if you pull it together and you're 5-2, the season feels a lot different one way or another. I'll talk to you all next week, and as always, Skol.